this year. How have you guys been? We've asked that several times. Before I get into the word, would you turn to the people beside you, behind you, give them a fist bump and just say, hey, good to see you in church. Hello, hello. If you're online, you can tag somebody, maybe give a comment or tag somebody that you want to see in church. And it's always good. We do not come to church alone. We do not worship alone. We're here together. So it's important that we take time to say hello. And we do want to encourage you later on, after the service is ended, please make sure that you get to know somebody new. Somebody new. When we wear our masks, sometimes we don't even recognize the people that we already know. But do you know that there are some people in this room that you've never met before? So assignment for you today, before you leave this building, please be sure that you meet somebody that you have never met before. Is that a deal? Is that okay? All right, so that's an assignment. I'm going to ask you next week if you do that, all right? We're going to have an exam. Okay, it's all good, it's all good. We're glad that you're here. It is Holy Week, as Renee mentioned, and some of you have already probably planned your holidays, your trips this week, and we're glad that you can have that time with your family, or maybe to go and visit your family. Those of you who've been living away from them, and those of you who are traveling, maybe you're watching online, we're glad that you've been able to tune in with us today. My name is Chad. I'm one of the pastors here at ICS, and it is always a joy for us to have you connect with us. Kids Jam is live and happening. So if you're not aware, or if you have kids, be sure that you send them over there as well. That's taking place right now. Last week we started a new series called Crossroad. And if you missed it, just go back to YouTube, go back and find out, catch up on what we're talking about in this series. Today is part 2, and today's title is Path to Humility. If you turn on the news today, and if you just actually observe what's going on around you, there is so much strife. Did you notice that? There's just a lot of problems so many people are facing. One country wants to take over another country, right? Here in our nation, your friend is trying to convince you as best as possible to vote for the one that they want to vote for this coming elections. And it's just causing a lot of strife. It's causing a lot of division, even in our families. What's happening in our families, right? We don't even understand one another. One generation cannot get. What are you doing? What's TikTok? What are you doing all that kind of dance? You look silly. And there's a disconnect. And there's a lot of strife. There's a lot of pain. And there's a lot of disunity that's happening. Did you notice that? Sometimes it's kind of disappointing to watch the news because that's all it seems that we hear. And it seems when things are going well, we then try to find things to be in conflict about. Whether it is ethnicity, regionalism, preferences, I like this food, I like this brand, I like this church, I like that church. I'm like, why? And as Christians, that's something we need to be aware of. That's something that we need to constantly keep in check. If we are conscious about our health, like many of us should be, we take our blood pressure every time we wake up in the morning, or we make sure that, hey, are you taking your medication? Are you doing your exercise? We've got to be sure that in our spiritual walk and in our relationship with one another, we keep in check this pulse of unity. Because it's something that Jesus fought for. It's something that we find in Scripture that is prevalent from the very beginning, right? In the Old Testament and in the New Testament. Unity seems to be something that is very important. It's something that's very important. There was a saying that says, if you travel on your own, you can go far. But if you travel together, you can go even further. Right? Have you heard of that? Because there are some people who like traveling alone. But it's funner, and it seems, when you feel like you've done all that you can, if you're on your own, there's nobody to encourage you. But if there's somebody that's there They can just encourage you, speak a word of affirmation, maybe even carry you so that you can go further. And that's only possible when we are united, when there is unity. Now, as God's people, it's never about uniformity. That's not what God calls us to be and to do. But it is important to be united. In fact, this is so important that sprinkled throughout scriptures, we find this. A cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. That makes sense. Yeah, 1 strand, you can snap it easily. A cord of 3 strands, it's not easily broken. 1 can send 1,000 to flight, 2, 10,000. Well, that doesn't even make sense mathematically, right? 1, 1,000, 2, 10,000, it's exponential. But there's power in unity. And Jesus talks about unity. In his longest prayer in John 17, he says, may they be one as you and I are one, as he's praying for his disciples, talking to his heavenly Father. And one thing that we're going to find out, when it comes to unity, there is an essential element. In fact, there are several. But one in particular that we want to focus on today. I believe in this season that Christians around the world, as we remember Holy Week, we remember Easter, the reason why Jesus Christ came, this is significant. Because if Jesus did not have this in his life, I believe it would have been impossible for him to do what he did. Humility helps build unity. Can you say that with me? Humility helps build unity. And this is what we want to bring emphasis on, or bring focus on today. It's okay. I mean, people try to manufacture unity, and sometimes people try to do that by printing the same shirts, wearing the same clothes, and we have the perception of unity because everybody looks the same. But when you get to know some of them better, you're going to find out, man, there's a lot of bickering, there's a lot of strife, there's a lot of conflict, even among certain people. So it's not proof that just because somebody appears united, that there is unity. But if there is humility in these relationships, we're going to find out that this ingredient, this element actually helps build, fosters, and even strengthens unity. We find Jesus living this out through his life. He teaches it. And Paul echoes this to the church in Philippi. And so to the Philippian church, there were some things that were going on in their community. It was a church that Paul loved very much. Why? Because he helped start it. It's one of the churches that he helped start together with Timothy. But, in the season of their journey, there were issues that were coming up. Probably differences of personalities, differences of opinions. And so Paul was wanting to remind them, guys, it's important to come together. In Philippians chapter 2, beginning in verse 1, here's what Paul tells the Philippian Christians. He says, therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and one in mind. He's calling them into unity. He was reminding them, he was saying, hey, are you guys happy that you follow Jesus? Great. That's a reason for joy. That's a reason for encouragement. But let me remind you that to be united in Christ requires several things. And it's important for you to be one in mind. There are some things that you're thinking about that is diverging away from Jesus, that it's even causing you strife and conflict in your relationships, in your belief in Christ. Let me remind you, you need to be reminded in Christ, not just in a particular belief, but in Jesus Christ. Let me remind you, you know what's going to help build unity among you is love. Everybody say love. That's something we hear about a lot of the time. And again, Paul reminds them, love is an important ingredient that we bring into our relationships so that ultimately we can be one in spirit, one in mind. And the main glue here, he talks here, it is all about uniting ourselves with Jesus Christ. This is important for us as Christians because a lot of us can be very highly opinionated. Some of us probably would even dig our heels. Did you know that there were some Christians who are so caught up in their belief and in their doctrine that they wouldn't even sit down with another Christian who doesn't exactly believe exactly what they believe? I've heard other pastors say that, in the essentials we should have unity, but in the non-essentials we should have charity. We should have a bit more room, a bit more grace. What do you mean in the essentials? Well, one essential that should bind all Christians, regardless of denomination or church affiliation, should be, we all believe that Jesus is the Son of God, that He was born sinless, that He lived a sinless life, that He died on the cross for our sins, and 3 days later He resurrected from the dead, and that He is coming back again. That's an essential belief in Christianity. Well, what about if I sing this kind of song? I like singing hymns. No, I like singing contemporary worship. Is that an essential belief? Probably not. Now the other question would be, what is the message of the song? If we really want to be technical. Yeah, that's definitely something we should discuss. But that's probably a non-essential. We can agree to disagree. You can love that and still be a Christian and be different from what I prefer, right? No. On Sunday, you should be wearing Sunday best. Every Sunday when you come to church, it should look like you're attending a wedding. No. See, when I come to church, I like being relaxed. I want to be able to worship freely because it's a bit restricting to me. Should that unite us? Should that different? There should be charity in that, right? Because that's not an essential. So here, there were some issues that were coming up in the Philippian church, and he would say, hey, this is causing this unity among you. Let me remind you that our unity needs to be anchored in Christ. Let me remind you that our unity needs to be related to Him, and how we relate to Jesus needs to be reflected in how we relate to one another. It doesn't matter if you are for that politician, or if that is your president, or this is your president, or that's the person you're going to vote for, this is the person I'm going to vote for. That doesn't matter. Because that election is going to happen one day. But you know what our relationship is? It's forever. Everybody say forever. So we shouldn't let one day determine what our relationship will be like after that day. The people that we vote for don't really care. Did you know that? It's important for us to vote, don't get me wrong. This is our prophetic voice, it's our responsibility. And sometimes we fight so emotionally, so passionately for certain individuals to the point that we lose relationship because of it. And Jesus never intended that for His church. He never intended for His body to be divided. And so here, Paul is reminding them, guys, be like-minded, like Christ. Having the same love, like Jesus. Be one in spirit and one of mind. Unity with one another reflects our unity with Christ. This is why this is important. Because if we cannot express that here, how can the world know? If we cannot do that well here, who's going to want to be part of this community? Right? Who's going to want to be part of a community that's this united, that has constantly have strife and conflict in it? No one. Nobody wants to go home, and the moment you get home, what do you see? Mom and dad are fighting, they're arguing. What does the child do? Okay, I'm not going to stay here, I'm just going to go out again. And sometimes we wonder, why is my teenager not back home yet? Where is this person going? Well, hold on, mom, dad, let's check. What happens? Is this constantly happening at home? Maybe there is a disunity between mom and dad. Counselors and marriage workers tell us a lot of times that sometimes the best way that we can parent our children is by loving our spouse really well. Loving our husband, loving our wife well. Sometimes that's the best way that we can parent our kids. But if that's not happening, there's disunity, there's quarrel, there's strife, there's constant conflict. Nobody wants to come home to that. So we got to keep that in check. Unity with one another reflects our unity with Christ. And that reflects to those that are watching around us. So Paul gives them instructions. He says, that's nice and good. We can quote that and we can put that on our wall. But I love Paul because he gives us handles. He gives us practical ways on how to live it out. And so Paul continues on. He says, do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit, rather in humility. Everybody say humility. Value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but to each of you to the interest of others. So here it's interesting because Paul begins to point out how to do it, but he also points out what you should avoid. So let's go with the negatives first. He says, you know what? Some things that could prevent unity from happening in our relationships is what? Selfishness. If you're in it just for yourself, then you shouldn't probably expect unity to develop at some point. If you're in that relationship because of what you can get out of it, more than what you can contribute, then that's selfish. It's all about me. I'm in this job because of what I can take, but you're not really thinking about how can I help this company do better and be better. No, I'm just here to get the money every 15th and 30th. I'm just here to get that. That's not going to be a happy kind of job, right? No, I'm just going to be in this church because of what I can get out of it. But the moment I get what I need, I'm out. I'm not going to commit. I'm not going to get to know the people because that's just too much effort. So here, he says, hey, that's selfish. Don't be selfish. We've got to watch out for our selfish ambitions. If our ambitions are all about us and not about the people around us, then that's not going to help build unity. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves. He says it's important when it comes to humility, we look at others. Not me first, but maybe it should be others first. Ladies, do you remember that time that guy wooed you, took you out on a date? Do you remember all the best efforts that they did for you? Right? When you came to the door, what did that gentleman do? Open the door. Ladies first, right? Do you remember that, ladies? Married ladies, 10-year married ladies later. Do you still remember that guy? You know, sometimes we forget that, right? We forget others first. We're like, yeah, I'm too hungry, I've got to go. And where is the beautiful lady? Oh, oops, sorry. Let's go back again. And sometimes we forget that. You know, sometimes over familiarity, they say, breeds contempt. You know, sometimes we get to know each other so well, married folks in our family, in the church, in our circles, in our small groups, that we start to take one another for granted. And when we take one another for granted, well, he's gonna forgive me anyway. Well, she's just gonna, it's gonna be okay with them. I'm just gonna come in late, I'll be forgiven. No, that's only gonna go so far. Especially when it comes to your workplace, right? And it's just gonna go so far, and we take one another for granted. Humility is considering others. Even though I've known them for so long, yes, I still wanna value them. I still wanna honor them. And we honor by having a heart of humility. Now, humility, sometimes, it sounds like a big word and it's hard to understand, but one phrase that helped me understand it was this. I read this phrase. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. Because sometimes that's what people think. Humility is about, letting other people walk all over you, use you as a doormat. That's not what humility is. That's not Christian humility. Humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. Wait, isn't that just a play of words? No. Thinking less of yourself is thinking that you're not worth anything. It's about your worth. You feel you're worthless. Your value is lesser than anybody else. No, all of us are created in God's image. There is nobody that is better than anybody else. We are all fearfully and wonderfully made. That's what Psalm says. That's how God created us. Nobody is better, nobody is lesser. We have different skills, we have different abilities, but it doesn't make you better, it doesn't make you lesser. Thinking of yourself less is others first. It's considering I have preferences, I have what I like, I have my convictions and values, but when I come into conflict with somebody else, I want to consider that I may not have it all. I want to consider first that I might not have all the truth. I may not have all the facts. I may not have all the answers. And so to consider others first is to come with my convictions, with my values, with my beliefs and say, you know what? This is what I believe. Go ahead. Please do share with me your thoughts as well. Not so that you can just argue with them, right? Some people do that. I'm going to allow you to share just so that I can rebut you. No, I'm going to allow you to share because I actually want to learn from you. Learning is a posture of humility. If we're not humble, we're not going to learn, right? We know this because when we went to school, who was sitting on the chairs? The students. Who was standing in front of the blackboard? That teacher. The posture of humility is somebody that receives and is willing to learn. Whenever we feel like I know more than you, or I know better than you, or I'm the only container of truth and everybody else is false, then it's very difficult, if not impossible, to actually walk in humility to attain unity. So very practical. I mean, if we look at Paul here, he's saying, you know what? Yes, we are united with Christ. We need to be like-minded. We need to allow love for one another. And yeah, we love one another. But that love needs to be expressed in humility. Humility towards God, humility towards others, and humility in me. Humility towards God is recognizing that, yes, you know what? There are some things that I am in control of, but there's a lot of things that's beyond my control. And because there's a lot of things that's outside of my control, I actually recognize the sovereignty of God above all things. I'm gonna submit to His sovereign will and purposes for my life. Man makes many plans, but it is God, right, whose will prevails. We can accumulate all the strategies, we can accumulate all the information and the knowledge of the world, and we can make amazing plans. In fact, we can even have all the wealth in the world, just like Solomon. But surprisingly, even Solomon, in all his wisdom, ended up being foolish in some of his dealings, causing destruction in his own life. So we need to recognize that, yes, Lord, there are some things that I can do on my own with my strength, with my will, with my abilities, with my possessions. But beyond that, I need to recognize that all that I have, first of all, came from you. And all that I can do is limited with what you allow. In my life, in my circumstances. Paul said, many times I attempted to visit Rome, and that's a good thing because he wanted to bring the gospel to Rome. But whenever he planned to go there, he was prevented from doing so. He was either imprisoned or ended up being shipwrecked. He ended up getting beaten up, getting flogged, all kinds of delays. Eventually, he did reach Rome. But he recognizes, yes, there are some things that even if it's of our best intentions, God will say, not yet, or that's not the way, this is what I want to do, this is when it needs to happen. We need to recognize His sovereignty. We need to be humble enough to recognize, yes, I'm not in control of my destiny. There is a greater power beyond me, and that is God. We need to be humble towards others. We explained that already earlier. Humility towards others is considering others. That I don't have all the answers, I'm not always right, that it's possible what I know may be wrong. So I'm going to humble enough to consider other people's opinions. When we're young, it's easier to do that. But when we get older and we feel like we know more, right? We have access to information. We do our own research. Sometimes we who don't have a medical degree try to tell the doctor what to prescribe to us. Are you one of those? That's probably one of the most frustrating things that doctors have to deal with today. Because people are armed with information, and there's nothing wrong with being informed. But there's a difference between somebody who's informed and somebody who's actually gone through the study. And they've worked hard. And their best intention, hopefully, would be for our benefit, is learning in humility to trust in what they say. Humility in ourselves is recognizing that I'm also in need. Being humble inwardly, I'm also in need. That I will have a point in my life when I will be in need of guidance, of help, of assistance. And so when we assume that posture of humility, it is there that we begin the path towards unity. You know, everybody likes to be with people like that, right? See, the problem with the world is the world doesn't like humility. The world is all about, hey, watch me, look at what I can do. If you're a little kid, that's okay. We want to encourage kids, right? We want to have them build up their confidence. But after a while, when you're an adult, when you're grown up, and it's all about me, watch me, I'm the only one has the way, then nobody really wants to play with you anymore. And nobody really wants to be around you anymore. Why? Because you never listen. You're always the one who wants to have your way. And instead of fostering unity, it fosters division. It fosters disunity. It fosters, you know what? I know better, follow me. No. They said they know better, follow them. And it doesn't really help situations. To build unity, we need to choose humility. This is a choice that we need to make every day. We need to choose to walk the path of humility. It doesn't come automatically. It doesn't just happen. We need to make that choice every day. In how we think, how we speak, how we interact with one another. The path of humility requires us to look beyond ourselves, to God, to others, and then finally to ourselves. But it begins outward. It begins outward in a position of learning, in a position that says, hey, I don't have it all together. We build unity by being humble towards God and others, and then ourselves. Finally, Paul says, you know what? One of the best ways to do this, to build unity, to foster humility in our lives, is to be like Jesus. In verse 5, he says, in your relationship with one another, have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. It's not enough that you say, you know what, I'm united with Jesus, I'm a Christian, I go to this church, great. I love this friend, this brother, this sister, wonderful. But beyond that, we need to have a transition in our own life. There needs to be a transformation that takes place within. We need to have the same mindset as Christ Jesus. And Paul explains to us how that came about. He says in verse 6, who being in the very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his advantage. This is what Jesus was doing, he was here on earth. Rather, he made himself nothing. Now, in my geek research, I found out this word nothing, he made himself nothing. The original word in Greek that was used for this was kenosis. Everybody say kenosis. Awesome. I didn't know you guys can speak Greek. Kenosis. And this means empty. That's literally what Jesus did when he came to earth. He was God, he was immortal, he received worship 24/7, right? He was beyond all of these things. But because he wanted to unite fallen man with Heavenly Father God, Jesus willingly, in humility, emptied himself of God ability. Not his deity, his identity did not change. He was still the Son of God. But he became man, fully God, fully human, choosing to withhold his God abilities, his omniscience, his omnipotence, his omnipresence, all-knowing, all-powerful, all-present at all times, and all of these other God abilities that he had. He decided to withhold it in that season when he was here on earth. Why? Because this was the only way so that humanity who had fallen because of sin could be united with a holy and righteous God. Is if God himself, who was the only holy, righteous entity in the entire universe and beyond, would redeem mankind who fell out of his grace, who became distant from him because of sin. Jesus emptied himself. This is what this whole week is all about. This is why Christians, millions around the world, for hundreds of years, if not thousands, have been remembering the importance of this week. Jesus' death and ultimately his resurrection. Because without what transpired about 2,000 years ago, without these things happening, Christianity doesn't mean anything. But because it is verifiable, historically, it did happen. We're going to talk about that next Sunday. We can trust without a shadow of a doubt that Jesus, he said who he said he is, he did what he said he would do, and he will continue to do the same today. In humility, this is what Jesus did. He made himself nothing, taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness, and being found in appearance as a man. He what? Humbled himself. There it is again, humility. The humility that Jesus expressed was him emptying of all of these things that he possessed, suspending all of these abilities just so that he could redeem all of mankind. He humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on the cross. He wasn't just obedient to death, that's already one thing, but he was obedient to a humiliating kind of death. Because the death on the cross is reserved for criminals. Jesus was no criminal. He never broken the law. In fact, he enforced it. And he asked other people, hey, give to Caesar what is Caesar's, give to God what is God's. He was reinforcing even the law that man created to govern the nation that he was in. There was nothing that they could try to stick on Jesus that would cause him to be crucified, that would cause him to die. But he was willing to die because this was the only way to redeem humanity from sin, so that we could be united with God. And it wasn't just death, it was humiliating, embarrassing, if you could use that word, shameful kind of death. Because if you were dying on the cross, that means you were a criminal. That means you did something wrong. That means you broke the law. And Jesus never did any of that. But he was willing to do it all. He didn't stop the people. He didn't call the heavenly armies of angels down to prevent them from doing what they did to him. falsely accusing him, beating him up, hurting him, and ultimately crucifying him and killing him. Because he knew that this was the only way, so that we could be redeemed and we could be united with God, our Heavenly Father. Therefore is the beauty. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place. Isn't that awesome? See, when we humble ourselves before God, what happens? He will be the one to lift us up. See, when we walk in humility, we don't have to tell people, hey, look what I've done, look at me. No. God himself will honor you when we honor God. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. If Jesus, while he was here on earth, limited himself to his God abilities, after his death and resurrection, God the Father fully restores Jesus to everything that he held back from, allowing him to receive the glory that rightfully belongs to him. Not just on earth, in heaven, and even hell itself would recognize that Jesus really is Lord. But for that to happen, what did Jesus do? He had to be humble. For us to be redeemed, Jesus had to humiliate himself. For us to be united with our loving Heavenly Father, so that in this life there's a possibility of living a life in abundance, and in the life to come we can live forevermore in his presence. Jesus had to humble himself. Ultimately, thinking like Jesus will help us talk and walk in humility, living like Jesus, emptying our life like Jesus did. The question today is, if Jesus emptied himself of those things, what is it in us that we need to empty ourselves of? Do you know it's possible that the reason why you and your spouse still are not able to resolve that conflict that you've been having for so long is because none of you want to give in to the other. It's not about being right anymore, it's just about your pride. Because nobody wants to be perceived as a weaker person. But you see, again, like Jesus, humility is not a sign of weakness. Humility is a sign of godliness. And if we say that we are followers of Jesus Christ, then shouldn't that characteristic be seen in our life? Shouldn't humility be seen in our life? I wonder what attitudes, what thoughts we have in our minds, in our hearts today when it comes to that conflict or that offense, that hurt that we're still holding on to, that happened in the workplace, that happened in the church. And may have been something, a word that was spoken to us, or it may have been an action that was done that causes hurt. And don't get me wrong, I'm not negating the pain that some people inflict. There are evil things in this world, and there is evil that will be done and inflicted upon us. But what I cannot look beyond is what Jesus did. Because on his way to the cross, he was getting spat on, he was getting beaten, he was all kinds of things. And it says in scriptures that he was quiet. He was led like a lamb to the slaughter. He didn't say a word. He didn't say a word. And you know, sometimes when it comes to walking the path of humility, sometimes it will be painful. You're going to be tempted and you know, man, I should speak out, I should say something. But you know that the moment you do, it will cost you that relationship. It will cost you that witness of what it means to follow Jesus. And at that time, the Holy Spirit will nudge to us, hold on to your tongue. Sometimes it's going to be the hardest things that we do. But when we do, if we know that we are honoring Christ, our hearts are right with Him, and our intentions are pure, God Himself will honor us. In His time, He will lift us up. In His way, vengeance will be exacted, not by us, but by God, because He alone is judge, not you and not me. And that's the path of humility. That's the path of humility. Can you imagine if we actually start to do that in our homes, if we, in our relationship with our spouse, parents to children, children to parents, the moment we commit an offense, we do something that hurts, we do something that's wrong, we quickly address the situation. We don't allow the sun to go down while we are still angry, but we say, hey, can we sit down and we talk about this? Because this hurt. Can I just tell you that what I said, I was wrong. I recognize that I was wrong. And sometimes that's probably one of the most difficult things that we'll ever do. But you know, when we do that, when we recognize that in humility, that we made a mistake, that we were wrong, that they were right, we actually become more like Jesus. Because humility comes out in our thoughts, in our words, in our actions, when we choose to hold our tongue. Humility. If there is injustice, then you should speak out. If there is hurt towards you, it was done towards you, you should speak out. But here we're talking about in our relationship, in our family, as a church. A lot of times, the cost of pride is what disallows us from fostering humility and ultimately building unity. And Jesus says, hey, it doesn't have to be that way. In fact, it shouldn't be that way. Because if you follow me, you're united with me. You are one with me. And if you think the way I think, if you walk the way I walk, if you talk the way I talk, if your priorities are along that path, and that's a path of humility. And the path of humility builds unity. Perhaps today, some of you need to have the talk in your family before this day ends. Maybe when you go back to work tomorrow, you need to talk to the office mate, to the boss that you spoke harshly towards, simply because you would not budge in your position. Or maybe somebody that you've been arguing with because of your political convictions. You need to say, hey, let's just go have coffee and not talk about politics. Let's just talk about something else, because this relationship is more important than all the other things that could divide us. And when we do that, you know what happens? You know what happens? In the book of John, it says, by this men will know that you're my disciples if you love one another. And love manifests in humility. Considering others first. Yes, I have my opinion. I'm going to share my opinion, but I want to sit down and listen to you and consider yours as well. Because when we do this as a church, as a family of believers, here, in another church, wherever, we reflect Jesus, and Jesus is seen in us. Would you stand with us today? We want to spend time in prayer right now.